Hey guys, welcome to the Kim Iversen Show. We do have a great one for you tonight. We're going to be talking about the man who is dubbed the Nostradamus of polling, who has predicted Kamala Harris is going to win the election. And he's only been wrong once since 1984. We're going to go over his methodology. Also, we're going to give you an update on Israel-Gaza, a lot of terrible things going on there. Steve Bannon has been let out of prison. Meanwhile, Paul Pelosi's attacker has been sentenced to life in prison. We also have a guest joining us tonight, Paul Thacker. He recently broke the story of a British disinformation organization. Right? They claim that they're out there fighting disinformation. Well, it turns out they've been working with the Harris campaign to take down Elon Musk's Twitter in an attempt to silence our free speech and sway the election. We're going to talk to him about that. And we're going to get to all of your comments and questions at the end of tonight's show. So we're doing things a little bit differently tonight. So if you're watching this on YouTube, welcome. Thank you for being here. We haven't been here in a while. You know, you probably wonder, where's the Kim Iversen Show? Well, here it is now. We're back. We're here on YouTube. But also, if you're watching this on Rumble, then you're in luck, because you won't have to go anywhere, because after the first half of this show, we're going to just be switching to Rumble exclusively, where we can speak more freely and without caution. And it's also when the show will get much more interactive. So I'm going to be looking at your comments during that time, and live chats and emails, and reading them off on Rumble. So we're expecting the total show to be about 2 hours on Rumble, 1 hour of which will be on YouTube. And we thank all of you for spending your evening with us. So let's get started. Right. The Nostradamus of polling, Alan Lichtman, has predicted, using a tool he created decades ago, that Kamala Harris will win the election. He's been using this tool since 1984 and has only been wrong one time, and one time only, and that was the Gore-Bush election, which, that election was, you know how that election was. So that's the only time that this has been wrong. So it's really, really accurate. He's now saying, according to this formula that he's developed with a Russian geophysicist, that Kamala Harris will win. The formula is called the Keys to the White House, and it consists of 13 true-false statements pertaining to circumstances surrounding the presidential election. Now, if 5 or fewer statements are false, then that means the incumbent party will remain in power. So if 6 or more are deemed false, then that means the other party will take power. And according to this, Lichtman claims that right now only 4 are false, which means, dun, 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 Kamala Harris and the Democrats will remain in power. Wah, wah. So let's go over these keys and see what we think, because I actually think this guy is not interpreting his own formula correctly. And I actually think that there are a lot more than 4 false statements, and that would indicate that Donald Trump is actually going to win the election. So let's go over these key statements. So here is the graph here. What we're showing you in this graph, the red is the false, the green is the true. The first bar up there is the 2016 election. I just wanted to show you the previous elections and this current one that he's predicting. So the first one up at the top is 2016. That was Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump. He predicted, using this formula, that Donald Trump would win. Nobody else was predicting that at the time. So you got to give the guy credit where credit's due. Although Alan Lichtman, I got to tell you, is a giant libtard, like giant. Like, he's totally against Donald Trump, wanted him to be impeached, super, super partisan. But the guy says, look, yes, maybe I'm a big Democrat, maybe I'm a big partisan guy, but I've been predicting presidential elections since 1984, and I even predict when it's a Republican, and I've been right. So, maybe I've got my own political leanings, but this is, it is what it is. But I do think that this one time it might be getting to him, which makes sense, because, the brain rot happens during elections, especially during all elections, brain rot happens, but it particularly when it pertains to Donald Trump. So that's why I think maybe this guy is not answering the questions correctly this time, and we'll go over it. But the first one on the graph, let's go back to that. That's 2016 at the top, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. He did predict Donald Trump won. 2020, he did predict that Joe Biden would win, according to, because the first one in 2016, there was 6 false statements. And remember, the formula says if there are, when you look at these true and false statements, if 6 of them are false, 6 or more, then the other party will win. And of course, in 2016, Obama was in power, so he predicted Donald Trump would win. 2020, it turned out that 7 were false. So he predicted Joe Biden would win based on those 7 false answers to the true or false statements. And now in 2024, he's saying that only 4 are false out of the 13 questions. What are the 13 questions? And let's see how you would answer these 13 questions. Okay, again, these are called the 13 keys to the White House. The first question is, after the midterm elections, it's called the party mandate question. After the midterm elections, the incumbent party holds more seats in the U.S. House of Representatives than after the previous midterm elections, true or false. So in this case with Kamala Harris and the Democrats and Joe Biden, the answer is false. Democrats have consistently, since 2020, lost seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. Maybe they've gained a couple or have lost. They have a net loss. So this party mandate question, they would have to, it would be okay if they lost some seats in 2020 as long as they gained them back, plus some in 2022. That would have made this statement true, that they had more seats than after the previous midterm elections, but they do not. In this case, Democrats have lost seats, and so this is false. So this is Kamala Harris's or Democrats' first false. So you might lose. Question number 2, true or false? There is no serious contest for the incumbent party nomination. Now, this one's weird, right? Because this was a weird election. And Alan Lichtman, according to this, claims that it's true. He says that's true. There was no serious contest for the incumbent party nomination. So he's saying it's true. Nobody challenged the incumbent. What? They took the guy out to pasture. They literally took him out back. And they basically, offed the guy. And then they brought in Kamala Harris. And even that was, okay, sure, I guess Democrats all fell in line. I mean, how can you make the claim? So he's saying it's true. There was no serious contest for the incumbent party nomination. This is where I think he's off his rocker. I think this is false. They didn't allow a contest. How can you say there was no serious contest when they literally didn't allow a contest? They took the old guy out to pasture. And then with the new lady, they just brought her in and said, nobody gets to have a say in this. We don't want to vote. There's no serious contest. So yeah, I guess when there's no contest, then I guess, if you don't have a contest, I guess there can't be a serious contest. So he says that's true. I protest this one a bit. I think this could go false. I think this one could go false. Okay, number 3, true or false? The incumbent party candidate is the sitting president. That's false, right? So, and he agrees, according to this, it's false. He says that's false, right? Joe Biden is not the incumbent party president, and he is the sitting president. So that's false. So that's another, Kamala, you might lose. Number 4, there is no significant third party or independent campaign. He says true. There was no significant third party or independent campaign. So according to the keys, if there was an independent challenger that actually people were really interested in, then that shows political instability. The whole point of these keys is to determine whether or not there's political stability or political instability. And if there's enough political instability, which is what all the false answers would indicate, then that means a shift, an earthquake. People want change. If there's political stability, people are overall happy. Maybe things are kind of mediocre, but they're overall happy and they're not really looking to have that earthquake of change by putting in the other party into power. A third party candidate represents political instability. That is showcasing that people are unhappy. Now he's saying that it's true there was no significant third party independent campaign. I suppose you would interpret it that way if you are a Democratic partisan hack and you completely disregard the Kennedy from a heritage Democrat family who ran because he, for one, wasn't getting a fair shake in the Democratic Party and then decided to go and become an independent. And he was being completely bamboozled by the mainstream media, by the DNC, by the whole thing. They even tried to get his name taken. They tried to sue him to the point where he couldn't be on the ballot, not allowing for that serious contest. So I actually think there was a significant third party or independent candidate who ran. I just think that, again, they didn't allow for that candidate to have any real serious consideration. So does that count? Does that count when you actually just sideline him completely by acting, just by, completely burying that? I don't know. I again, like number two, with him claiming that there was no serious contest for the primary, I dispute this one. I think this one could also be false. So if that's the case, now the 4 that he claims Kamala has could have turned into 6. That means Donald Trump wins. And we're just on question number 4 right now, okay? Question number 5, true or false? Now he says it's true, okay? Just like every Democrat has been gaslighting us into telling us this is true. The economy is not in a recession. He says, true, it's not a recession. This is what Democrats have been saying, right? Don't believe your lying checkbooks. Don't believe your lying bank accounts. You're fine. The economy is strong. So what if you're paying $7 for a carton of eggs, or $12 at one point, or whatever it was, right? So what if inflation is runaway, what do they call it? Transitory inflation. Transitory inflation. Oops, it wasn't so transitory after all, was it? No. Okay, so they're saying the economy is not in a recession, even though they've defined recession differently than how the American people feel it. He also says it's true that the real per capita, this is question number 6, real per capita economic growth during the term equals or exceeds mean growth during the previous 2 terms. So meaning strong long-term economy. So the first one was strong short-term economy. He says true. And then the second question, strong long-term economy, he says true. Americans would like a word with you, Alan Lichtman. Not so sure about that. So that right there could be false number 7 for Kamala Harris. That means Trump would win, according to this formula. Question number 7, the incumbent administration, so this is the Biden administration or the Democrat administration, affects major changes in national policy. So he says that is true. He says there was some major changes in national policy. He cites Build Back Better and going back to the Paris Climate Accord, and also the World Health Organization, strengthening the World Health Organization as major changes in national policy. I don't know how previous major national policy changes were like things like, and he cites in here examples of the New Deal, the Great New Deal, and also Obama's, Obamacare. Those types of things are major shifts in national policy. I agree with that. I don't feel like there's been any major change in national policy. He also cites undoing Trump's executive orders. Again, kind of showing his partisan hack there, right? Question number 8. So on that one, okay, maybe we'll give it to him and say, all right, maybe, I guess if you want to call Build Back Better and joining the Paris Climate Accord is major change in national policy, okay, fine. Let's just give it to him because there's so many others we can take. So number 8. Here's another one. He says, true. There's no sustained social unrest during the term. Historical examples that are used in these keys to the White House are things like George Floyd, the protests, and also, interestingly, the anti-war protests of Vietnam. So now he's saying, it's true, there's no sustained social unrest during the term, yet college campuses have been filled with unrest as students have been protesting the United States' support of Israel. Many Americans are very upset about this. There's been, I think there's been sustained social unrest during this term. I think he's wrong on that. Okay, number 9. The incumbent administration is untainted by major scandal. Okay, was there, we're not dealing with like impeachments like we did with Donald Trump, or like major sex scandals that have come out that the media has paid any attention to. I personally think taking Joe Biden taking him out to pasture is kind of a scandal. I mean, I think taking a president, a sitting president who wanted to run, who was actively running for president again for re-election, and completely thwarting democracy and putting in a new person that nobody voted for. I mean, I kind of think that that's a major scandal, but he's not viewing that as a major scandal. Okay, I mean, Hunter Biden, the Hunter Biden laptop scandal. I mean, those are scandals, right? Those are kind of scandals. So to say that the incumbent administration is untainted by major scandal, I mean, the guy has dementia. So you've got a dementia president. That's a scandal. Who's running the country? People are wondering. They take him out to pasture. That's a scandal. They stick in the vice president who nobody liked, nobody voted for. That's kind of a scandal. Hunter Biden, kind of a scandal. All of this is a bit of a scandal, but okay. Maybe we'll give that one to him just to give him something. Number 10, the incumbent administration suffers no major failure in foreign or military affairs. Now, on this one, he did say that's false. So he at least does cite Gaza and the failures with getting a ceasefire done there as a failure. So I agree with him on that one. Number 11, he says, the incumbent administration, he says this is true. The incumbent administration achieved a major success in foreign or military affairs. Now, what major success does Alan Lichtman claim the Biden-Harris administration achieved? Oh, funny you ask. Ukraine. He cites Ukraine as being a victory, a foreign military achievement is Ukraine. The thinking is rallying up all the NATO allies to support Ukraine with endless weapons and endless money, throwing hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian bodies at this war is somehow a great achievement for the administration. I don't know if I agree with that. I think a lot of America, now, you know what, actually, I'm going to sadly agree with him on this one, not because I think that's actually a foreign policy achievement, but because I think that many Americans do view it that way. I think the majority of Americans view Ukraine. I do think the majority of Americans want to support Ukraine. And I do think the majority of Americans view Ukraine not being completely taken over by Russia as an achievement. The majority of Americans, unfortunately, ignore all the historical facts that led up to this war. They ignore all of the dead bodies. They're ignoring all of these things. But I do think I'm going to have to give that to them, I suppose, that the majority of Americans agree. Okay, number 12, true or false, the incumbent party candidate is charismatic or a national hero. He also agreed that's false. He says that's false. Kamala Harris is not charismatic or a national hero. Okay, I agree. There's nothing charismatic, and she hasn't done anything that's hero status. We don't have that. But number 13, he says this is true, and I don't know if I agree with this, but he says the challenging party candidate is not charismatic or a national hero. Fight, fight, fight. That kind of made Trump a national icon and a hero. That, no matter whether, I've had so many conversations with people who are not voting for Donald Trump. They do not like Donald Trump, but they still viewed that moment as iconic, that was a true American moment. The man was shot and he stands up and says, fight, 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 as he's got blood dripping down his ear. Many people can view that and say, that made us proud as Americans. That was a moment where he showed American strength, American resilience, American gumption to get back up and fight no matter what happens. That was a very American moment. And that will go down in history, guys. Whether you like Donald Trump or not, that will go down in history as one of the greatest moments in American history. And generations from now, when we're all long dead, generations from now, all of those kids who are yet to be born, the generations yet to be conceived, when they come into American existence, they will read that story and see the footage, and they will view that as historic because they won't be tainted by all of the political fighting that we see and the toxicity and the smears and the slander and all of that stuff. They're not going to be tainted by any of that. They're just going to see an iconic moment and they're going to think that guy is a hero for fight, fight, fight while he's got blood dripping down his ear. So I don't think I agree with that one either with Alan Lichtman. And not only that, but how can you say Trump is not charismatic? The guy's charismatic. I mean, if anything, remember the guy was a TV star. So to sit here and say he's uncharismatic, like as if you're comparing him to Joe Biden, you're comparing him to Kamala Harris, right? This guy is charismatic. If that's the one thing he definitely is. He was a TV star before he became president. That's how people knew him. Donald Trump, you're fired from The Apprentice. I mean, this guy was so to say that he's not charismatic is so bizarre to me. So I'm going to say Alan Lichtman is wrong on this. He has predicted. Now, look, that could just be me. That could be me. That could be you. We might think he's wrong. What really matters is how the majority of the American people feel, particularly independents, right? So it won't really matter about what Republicans think because they're going to vote Trump. Democrats are going to vote Kamala Harris. It really matters how independents view these 13 keys and how they then interpret them. That's really what it comes down to. But by my math, I'm going to say and remember, the keys say if it's 5 or fewer false, then the incumbent party wins. If it's 6 or more false, then the challenging party wins. And by my count, I say number 1 is false. Number 2 is false. Number 3 is false. Number 4 is false. Number 5 is false. Number 6 is false. Number 7, we decided to give it to him. Number 8 is the no social unrest. What do we think? Do we think we want to give that to him, or do we want to say that the unrest at the college campuses is enough? You know what? Let's just give it to him. Throw a dog a bone. Okay, so we'll say, okay, fine, that's true. There's no real big, it's not like George Floyd. It's not like COVID. Okay, fine. No scandal. All right, fine. We'll give him that one, even though I don't agree. They took the old man out to pasture. But no foreign military failure. That's 7. Okay. No major foreign or military success. We said we'd give it to him. Charismatic incumbent. That's false. That's 8. And uncharismatic challenger or national hero. I think he's wrong on that. That's 9. By my math, and I'm being generous, right? I could have taken 11 out of the 13, but we're just going to say 9 just to be nice. 9 out of 13, that means Donald Trump wins. So but this guy is the Nostradamus of polling, and he's been right every single time except with Al Gore and George Bush. And that was the Supreme Court had to decide that one. So this formula, and when they developed this formula, him and this Russian geophysicist, they went way back in time and they applied it to a variety of all of the elections in the past in order to fine tune this to make it correct and accurate. And then since they've been using it since 1984, it has been accurate except for George Bush and Al Gore. And even then that was a hotly contested, and it's very possible that Al Gore actually won that election. I mean, he could have been right on that one too. So, but man, Kamala Harris, what if she wins, guys? I don't know. That to me is going to be the biggest. People are, if Donald Trump wins, there's going to be just unrest. It's going to be terrible. I just think if Kamala Harris wins, there's going to be a lot of, how can this person, nobody's voted for her. Nobody's liked her. Anyway, we'll find out, and we're a week away. We're 1 week away to finding out exactly what's going to happen. But tell me your thoughts. Comment down below. Tell me, what do you think about these keys? Do you think that Alan Lichtman's right? Do you think that he's wrong? You can also email me, kim@kimiversen.com. All right, guys, this is it. CB Distillery's fall sale is on right now. You can save up to 40% on everything. So this is your chance to save. If you're stressed out, struggling to sleep, or you have pain after exercise, CB Distillery has a plant-based solution just for you. They've got natural solutions for everything: stress, sleep, pain after workouts, even mood and focus. And it's all made with the highest quality, clean ingredients. A lot of you have been raving about the benefits you've seen with CB Distillery's products, especially when it comes to getting better sleep. So if you're looking for better sleep, more calm, especially this election season, or pain relief after exercise, now's the time to give CB Distillery a try and save big. So don't miss this massive sale. Get up to 40% off your entire order. Visit cbdistillery.com, enter code RUMBLE. That's cbdistillery.com, code RUMBLE, cbdistillery.com. Not available in Idaho, Iowa, and South Dakota. All right, let's talk about Israel and Gaza. Israel has banned the main humanitarian aid organization, UNRWA, from all of Israel and Palestine. They also struck an apartment building, killing over 115 people. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris says, never again to Donald Trump, the supposed Hitler, from being in the Oval Office, while her administration aids and abets a genocide. Also, her husband, Doug Emhoff, went on a speaking tour saying there will be a mezuzah hung on the front door of the White House, just completely tone deaf. So let's start off with Israel banning UNRWA and what this means for the Palestinian people. This is awful, what's happening. And what's really notable about this in particular, so just so that you guys know, UNRWA is the UN rights and humanitarian. It's actually the main provider of humanitarian relief, not just in Gaza, but also in the West Bank and in the entire region. They are the number one provider of humanitarian aid into the region. They also provide, in addition to the humanitarian aid that is much needed during this wartime, they also provide education, healthcare, shelter, especially during this time. So removing UNRWA and saying we're banning UNRWA, the number one aid organization in Gaza and in the West Bank and in East Palestine, East Jerusalem. What this is showcasing is that Israel is giving the giant middle finger to the United States. If you remember a couple of weeks ago, Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin put out a letter to Israel saying, cease and desist with your blockage of humanitarian aid. You're blocking humanitarian aid. We are highly concerned about this. This is against international law. And if you continue to do this, we cannot give you weapons. And you've got 30 days to correct this or else. And what does Israel do? Israel says, yeah, we're calling your bluff, America. We own you. So we're calling your bluff. We don't care what you say. We're going to continue doing what we're doing. And what is it that they're doing is not just banning UNRWA from the Palestinian territories, but they've also basically implemented a plan that they claim was conspiracy theory. The general's plan is what it was called, also known as surrender or starve. And they claim that this was a conspiracy theory. Oh, yeah, there have been a lot of plans that have been put out there. This is one of many. We're not actually doing this. And that's when Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin, I mean, there must have been some real genuine concern that they were actually going to go through with the general's plan, which was very specifically to take all of the people in the north of Gaza, which include Gaza City. That's the main, most populated area of Gaza, which most people are now in the south, but there's still some people in the north. And to basically tell all of these people, you will be cut off from humanitarian aid. You'll be cut off from water. You'll be cut off from food. You'll be cut off from all medical. And all of this will happen. So you'll starve to death. I mean, we'll just kill you unless you move. You have to surrender or starve, which is move south. You're not welcome here. We're clearing the land. We're ethnically clearing the land of all of you. We don't care if you're old, in a wheelchair. We don't care if you're deaf, blind, and 95 years old. You got to go, or you're going to be considered an enemy combatant. That plan was leaked. Israel denied it. Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin said, well, you better not do that, which means the fact that they even put a letter out there saying, you better do this. And by the way, they've not allowed any aid whatsoever in the north of Gaza since the beginning of the month. And Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin, who've been staunch supporters of Israel this whole time, saw that and must have had information we don't really have. They got the insider information that Israel's genuinely doing this. And they wrote them a letter and said, cease and desist or else. And Israel did not. Instead, they said, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. And then what we see are images of them marching people, hundreds and hundreds of people from the north to the south. And more notably, what we notice in the march of the people is that there are no men and there are no boys over the age of 12 or 13 years old, that it's women and children being marched to the south. And where are the men? Where are the boys over the age of 13? Well, Israel deems all of them combatants or potential combatants. And so they've been rounding them up, and we don't know exactly where they've been taking them. But what we do know is that they have been implementing this general's plan that they claimed was a conspiracy theory or one of many plans that they had, but they weren't really taking that one seriously. And we're now watching them actually implement it. They're implementing it in real time. And part of that implementation is now banning UNRWA, another showcasing of them implementing this surrender or starve policy plan that they put out there, and now banning UNRWA, saying there will be no aid into the whole of Israel. None of the Palestinian territories will have any aid from UNRWA. Why do they say? Because a handful out of the many hundreds of thousands of, maybe even thousands of workers that work for UNRWA, a handful that you could count, a handful participated in October 7th. So a handful worked also for, can you control your employees? Do you know, if you own a business, do you know what all of your employees do when they're not working for you? Do you control what they do in their free time? Do you know what political affiliations they have? Do you know how they vote? Are you controlling that, by the way? Are you controlling your employees' votes? I mean, to think that UNRWA should have to control every individual that works for their organization is absurd. But Israel took that and ran with it as an excuse to ban humanitarian aid from going into Palestine, as an excuse to essentially starve the Palestinian people and to deny them aid and to deny them relief and to deny them shelter and water and medicines. That is what Israel has done. And this wasn't even a close vote. They voted on this. This was not something that the top generals have decided to do. No, this went to the Knesset, and the Knesset actually had to vote on this. And they voted overwhelmingly. The only ones who voted against this were, the Arab politicians in the Knesset said, wait a minute, we don't really like this. This doesn't sound like a good plan. But all the Israelis, all the Jewish Israeli Knesset members voted for this, and the Arab Knesset members were not so fond of this idea. And now they have passed two measures to ban UNRWA, the main provider of humanitarian relief from the Palestinians. So that shows they do not care. They're not listening to the U.S. They don't care who's in office. They have complete control. They know it. And they know that we're not going to really do anything about it. And pretty soon the 30 days are up. And I don't know how the U.S. government is going to spend this. I'm really curious to find out, how are they going to spend this? How are they going to look the American people in the eye and say, no, they've been allowing some. We told them they needed to up the humanitarian aid, and they did after they banned. I mean, they've categorically not. They're doing less. They're harming humanitarian aid even more. So I'm really interested to see how the U.S. spins this, because I don't think the U.S. is going to stop arming them. This has gotten even Germany, which has been Germany with their rightful guilt that they've got towards the Jewish people. They turn a blind eye to anything and everything Israel does. They just say Israel's fine. We don't criticize them. They can do whatever they want. Anybody in Germany who criticizes them, that's against the law. We don't allow that. No protests against Israel, no criticism of Israel. But even Germany is saying, wait a minute, this isn't right. You guys should not be doing this. They've condemned the world. They've condemned the Israelis and their decision to ban UNRWA. All right, let's talk about, so we'll see what happens with that. We'll see if the U.S. we'll see if we live up to our word, right? If we live up to our threats, and apparently, I don't think we will. Also, this is very tragic. At least 115 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli strikes on Gaza. The majority of the 115, 109 of them were killed in an apartment building. They were not given any warning. So Israel, the most moral military in the world, always claims that they do these roof knockings, which those in and of itself are ridiculous. They kind of drop a dummy bomb on top of a building, and that's supposed to warn the building that a bomb is actually coming, and then the people would clear the building. But buildings are often multiple stories. Who's to say there's somebody even on the roof to hear the knock? And then would they then notify all of the other people down below of the knock? And would they get out of the building? That's one of the problems with this whole roof knocking that they claim they do. That is a great humanitarian service to the Palestinian people because they're the most moral military in the world. Well, they apparently didn't do any of that for this at all. These people got no warning whatsoever. And now this is the deadliest strike in Israel in months. And they have killed 115 Palestinians, many of them children, many of them women. And again, they just do not care. They absolutely do not care. If these were Israelis who were killed, this would mean, I mean, I wouldn't put it past Israel to just drop a nuke, you know, if they, oh, you killed 115 of us. This is horrific. This is the worst thing ever. We're going to really come after you. I mean, we've seen what they've done after October 7th. If there was one bomb, like let's say coming from Iran or Hezbollah or the Houthis, and it wiped out 115 Israelis, I think we would see a very different reaction from the world, from the media, from Israel. And the Palestinians are just left to suffer like this for now over a year. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris says, never again, never again. So she totally tone deaf to this, right? Totally tone deaf to the fact that her administration is in charge right now. Her administration is the one allowing Israel to drop bombs on women and children, killing over 100 people in one fell swoop. Her administration is in charge right now, allowing Israel to cut off aid completely to the Palestinian people, to implement this surrender or starve plan, to commit ethnic cleansing. That's all happening under her administration. Yet Democrats, and especially Kamala Harris, has the gall to actually say never again to Donald Trump. Watch this.
And let us be clear. Anyone who suggests we should terminate the Constitution of the United States should never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States of America. Never again. Never again.
Never again. Never again. Using that phrase, we all know what that phrase is for, right? That's for the Holocaust. Never again for a genocide. Never again for a Holocaust. And yet here's Kamala Harris, her administration, aiding and abetting a genocide and a Holocaust. And she says, never again to Donald Trump, the guy who did not do this. Maybe he would if he got into office, maybe, but he hasn't. They have, she has. Donald Trump hasn't, but she's saying never again to Donald Trump. Meanwhile, her husband delivered some closing remarks to this Jewish organization. He's talking to U.S. Jews. He's warning of anti-Semitism under Trump, right? He's saying that, he said, quote, it's uncomfortable and unsettling time to be Jewish. These are hard days. There's a pride in our people, but also a deep sense of insecurity. He said that, he knows Jews who are hesitant to wear symbols publicly and parents worried about their children's security in college campuses. And he says, we never should have to wonder where our government stands or whether our leaders are praising Nazis behind closed doors. So again, bringing up that Nazi imagery, trying to liken the Trump administration to the Nazis, trying to say, they're the Nazis, not us, not the ones that are actually aiding and abetting in a genocide. It's them, not us. But he is saying, look, we stand with the Jewish people no matter what, apparently no matter what. And he even says, watch this, that there will be a mezuzah on the front door of the White House, just totally tone deaf to what is going on right now in the world and what Americans are really heartbroken over. Watch this.
Now, anyone can say the right things on the campaign trail and then go home and turn it off. But that's not Kamala. Because when Kamala walks through the door at the end of the day, that door has a mezuzah on it. And 3 months from now, with your help, the White House residents could, I got to check first, could have a mezuzah on its doorpost.
Okay, just completely tone deaf to the reality of what has happened. That's totally fine. I don't have anything against the White House having a mezuzah on their front door. I have one on mine, to be honest with you, because we bought our house from a Jewish family and we left it there because it's supposed to bring blessings. And, I'll take all the ones I can get. I don't care what religion's going to give them to me. So I don't have a problem with that. I just think that right now in today's climate, when you've got people heartbroken over dead Palestinians, watching people starve, watching death marches, this isn't really the best time to be saying to just the optics, the timing is kind of off on this. The timing is off on this. For them to be likening the Trump administration to Nazis, for Kamala Harris to be saying never again about the Donald Trump administration when they're the ones committing the genocide. This is just really, really cringe. All right, guys, we're going to move on with the show. We do have a great guest coming up here. We're going to go ahead and grab him. We're going to talk about disinformation and how the Kamala Harris campaign has been colluding essentially with Brits. So let's grab him and let's get moving on with the show. British political operatives, not Russian, not Iranian, British operatives who are closely tied to Kamala Harris and the UK's Labour Party are allegedly meddling in our elections by plotting to take down Elon Musk's Twitter. Why? Well, because Twitter has become the last major platform where real debate, real dissent, and real freedom of speech can happen. And this isn't just about one social media platform. It's about foreign actors trying to control what Americans can say and see, potentially swinging the next election. Our guest tonight, Paul Thacker, broke this story wide open, uncovering the plot, the players, the plans, and he's here to explain how this impacts every single one of us. Paul Thacker, independent journalist, former U.S. Senate investigator, founder of Disinformation Chronicle. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here, Paul. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'll make one correction on the intro. They're not
Sure.
allegedly interfering in our elections. They are interfering in our elections.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's not the Russians. It's not the Iranians. They keep telling us it's them that are interfering with our elections, but it's actually the damn Brits still messing with us.
It is.
Yeah,
I think they're paying us back because one of my colleagues, when I was in the Senate, actually became a political operative, and he was the guy behind Brexit. So maybe it's payback.
Okay. So tell us about this. So you have been uncovering this with Matt Taibbi recently, the Center for Countering Digital Hate. And we first heard about the Center for Countering Digital Hate. When was this? This was because you wrote about this. You've been covering this organization for a while, and you wrote about this. What was it? A year or two ago during COVID. They came out. They're the ones that came out with the Disinformation Dozen, the dirty Disinformation Dozen, or what was it called?
Correct.
Yeah, so tell us about
Disinformation.
Yeah.
And who they were is it was a group that so when that report came out, the Disinformation Dozen, I saw it happening on Twitter, and I was like, okay, whatever. Like, I didn't know what was really going on, but at some point in time, I stopped to take a harder look at this entire censorship industry, what I call big disinformation, and what had happened. Written an investigation for the BMJ looking into problems with Pfizer's clinical trial, and the thing was based upon documents. It was based upon internal recordings, secret recordings that were made by a whistleblower, and so there was nothing to discuss about the story. It was a solid story. There was no cracks in it, and we got one of these fact checkers that came out and fact checked us on it, and so we couldn't share it on Facebook. And my editor called me up to talk to me about it, and what I told her at the time was, there's nothing wrong with this story. If there was anything wrong with this story, you would know it because you would have already gotten the letter from Pfizer's general counsel. And the lawyers couldn't find any problem with the story. So this fact checker is not going to find any problem with the story. And they didn't find any problems with the story. They just said lacks context. And I had no clue what that meant at the time, but it disallowed people's ability to share it on Twitter. So I started thinking, what is all this disinformation stuff that's out there? I keep seeing it, your disinformation, and we're not censoring things, we're moderating them, right? And so I started looking at the Center for Countering Digital Hate because they had made such a big impact, and they come out of nowhere, and they were being quoted from the podium of the White House. Biden even mentioned them, talking about Facebook, they're killing people. And so I dug into their background and found their 990s, found their money, and wrote a story about this for Tablet last year. The group is run by, they pretend to be a disinterested nonprofit. They were created back in 2017 by a guy named Morgan McSweeney. He's now the chief of staff to Prime Minister Keir Starmer. They worked behind the scenes. They were very hidden. And one of the first things they did was they killed off The Canary, which is a leftist website in the UK. Of course, none of us have heard about it over here, in the States. But they killed them off by basically accusing them repetitively of anti-Semitism, for which there was no merit for any of that at all. But it basically hurt their advertisers. And so they had created a strategy in which they would make accusations of misinformation or anti-Semitism or hate or whatever you want to call it, to basically drive advertisers away from this media outlet. And it caused them to have to lay off the majority of their staff. I interviewed the former editor-in-chief of this. She was almost in tears when I was talking to her. She was talking about how, she was a woman of color, she had autism, And, she was like, well, who do you think the Nazis came after first? It was people like me, and then now I'm being accused of being a Nazi. And she's like, it was so crazy. I mean, the woman almost started crying when I started interviewing her, at the time for Tablet. The other thing that it explained to me was something that I think a lot of conservatives get wrong. A lot of conservatives think that this misinformation, disinformation stuff is about censoring them. That's not what it's about. It's censoring everyone. It's censoring people on the left, people on the right, anyone who steps outside the narrow boundaries of the center left, right? The sort of corporate arm of the Democrats or the corporate arm, sort of conservative arm of the Labor Party. So that to me was very eye-opening, trying to understand like who they were. The other thing you have to understand about them, they're a dark money group. You can't tell where their money's coming from. No one understood where the money was coming from when they operated in London. When I look through their 990s, when they first popped up in the United States, so now they have an arm in the United States. Imran Ahmed actually lives in the United States now. He lives in the District of Columbia. I looked through their 990s. In their first year, they had raised almost $1.5 million as a brand spanking new profit out of the gate. And I thought that was like very hard to understand. And then I tracked down through a donor-assisted fund, I think is what they're called. It allows wealthy people to give money to an entity that then gives the money out where they want it to go, so it doesn't track back to the original person. You just see it coming from, in this case, it's a Charles Schwab fund. So there was $1.1 million that went to the Center for Counter Digital Hate, because on the 990s, you can see who the donors are, right? I'm sorry, you can't see who the donors are, but you can tell how much money they brought in. But on the donor assisted fund, I could see that they had given $1.1 million to the Center for Countering Digital Hate. So then I looked to see, okay, you got $1.1 million from this donor assisted fund. You got $1.5 million that year. That's almost 75% of your money came from one single donor. Well, what I know now from an insider is that came from a woman named Aline Kashishian, who is an agent in Hollywood. She's the agent for Mark Ruffalo. One of her partners, I just found out today, is the agent for Selena Gomez, who I know now just gave them a secret $100,000. So a lot of their bolus of money came initially, when they landed in the United States at least, out of Hollywood. Mark Ruffalo is on Twitter promoting the Center for Counter Digital Hate. Now, here's the funny thing about Mark Ruffalo. The first thing that Center for Counter Digital Hate did was they took out Jeremy Corbyn. They pushed him out of leadership so that Keir Starmer could take control of the Labor Party. Guess who Mark Ruffalo was gaga about for being Prime Minister of the UK? Jeremy Corbyn. He's now working directly with the guy, Imran Ahmed, who helped to push Jeremy Corbyn out of office. Now, part of that is because Imran Ahmed's a very clever operator. And, I'm sure Mark Ruffalo doesn't spend a lot of time trying to understand the internal politics of what's happening in London any more than he does trying to understand what's happening in DC. But it just shows you that, like, these dark money groups, even the people supporting them don't really know what they're doing.
Right. I think I think that needs to be understood more, that a lot of people just buy in, especially people with money, celebrities in particular. They're just buying into whatever they're being sold. So someone says, look, we got a problem online with all these extremists and all this misinformation and disinformation. Don't you agree? And these people say, oh, yeah, I agree. Oh, and you're a good guy. You're going to go do something about it. But they don't realize that this supposed good guy that's going to go do something about it has his own agenda, has their own, they've got their own vision for how they see things and how to get from point A to point B. And it might not always align with the person giving them money. Sometimes it does. Like sometimes, a lot of times people with money will control the situation. And other times they're just useful idiots in a way, just giving them the money and then they run off and do these types of things, which is kind of interesting. So tell us.
I've seen that.
Go ahead.
So often, by the way, I've seen that so often, by the way, with nonprofits in DC, in which there are just some people who are their skill set is tickling money out of rich people, and that's a skill set all its own. And I think that's really much the case. Ahmed is knowing how to manipulate wealthy people in Hollywood. One of the initial donors I found out was Sacha Baron Cohen. Early on, who gave him some money initially, but I don't think he's giving money anymore. I think he figured out who this guy is.
Hmm.
But the whole game is basically to, when they landed in DC, from what I could tell, the game initially was to attack. There's no real left in America, right? I mean, we've got the Squad, we've got Senator Sanders, who's now like, come back into the fold. So there's not a real left in America, maybe the Santa Monica City Council or something like that. But at the federal level, we don't have a real left, in America. So there was no real threat from that. So the initial game plan, for what I could tell, based upon who they were messaging on and who they were going after, was to attack the two threats to the Democratic Party. And those two threats were Elon Musk, because he bought Twitter, and RFK Jr. And that's who they hammered on repetitively over and over and over again in their first year.
Yeah, yeah, they really did. Tell us, before we get on to how you uncovered that they were trying to kill Elon Musk's Twitter, and what that
Right.
means exactly. How did they have so much power that when you wrote something and they flagged it, it wasn't shared? How did they even get that kind of power to be able to sway platforms like this?
I think it's partly, first off, the guy who's running Imran Ahmed's a very clever, very smart guy. Like, this guy's a pure political operative, out of London. The problem, I've emailed some of his people over, and what I've told them is, London ain't DC. I know DC, and baby, when you come to DC, you gotta level up. So their game is a London game. It's not quite ready, I don't think, for DC, which is why I was able to pick them off so easily. But
Hmm.
they interact directly with the advertisers. They interact, like, they were going directly to Twitter. We have some stuff out of the Twitter files where they were sharing their stuff internally, and then Twitter was taking action. They have good relationships with people at Meta. So they have relationships with all the social media outlets, also with politicians back in London. So Imran, the online safety bill in England, he, the guy who, excuse me, the guy who sponsored that bill, Damian Collins, he's on the board. He's an MP who's on the board of the Center for Countering Digital Hate. The first person who spoke in favor of the bill was Imran Ahmed in Parliament.
Okay. So now tell us, how did you uncover that they were trying to kill Elon Musk's Twitter? And what exactly was the
So,
plan to get that done?
so I'd written a couple pieces, and there's a lot of deep unhappiness inside the organization. And, several people have read the pieces that I wrote, and I got contacts out of the blue and started talking to people, and they're telling me what's happening. And I said, hey, I just want to let you know, it's great, to talk to me and tell me these things. I can't really do much with that. I can do much more if I have documents. And then suddenly I started getting documents appearing, like, in my email. I've gotten documents just recently. There's people inside there today who are still leaking stuff because they realize, first off, that Imran Ahmed is not someone they necessarily want to work with. But also, I think there's some deep concerns about, what this organization is doing. If you look at that monthly planner, that we released, where it talks about how their annual priority is to kill Musk's Twitter. At other
Hmm.
times, in different weeks, they talk about whether they need to incorporate a C4 or not. And so they're actually, under the IRS, they're incorporated as a C3, which that status allows you to be educational in nature. And so you can, do things because you're mostly doing education. Once you begin directly lobbying, like spending a majority of your time lobbying, my understanding from, living in DC is once you go above 20% of your time, then you need to register as a lobbyist. And so once you begin directly lobbying, then you need to incorporate a separate entity under the IRS tax code, which is the C4. But there's different transparency issues at that point. I don't think you can hide your donors. And so they're in a really tough position because I think they know that they're running afoul of, current IRS regulations, but they haven't formed this C4 yet. So they're
Hmm.
really they're really like right on the edge with everything they do. The hidden money, they're pretending to be educational while they're actually, lobbying. And also just the basic fact that they're a political campaign. They're not educational in any way. They're no more
Right.
educational than Media Matters for America. They're no more educational than, Stephen Miller on the right with American First Legal. This guy's nakedly a political partisan for Trump. There's nothing wrong with that, The problem is when the media doesn't explain that to readers and treats them as if they're an objective nonprofit who can be trusted. And that's what's happened over and
Right.
over again for several years now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's really, well, at least with Democrats, right? Democrats are trusting a lot of these sources and then using it. And as we saw Biden citing them at the podium and saying, well, this organization said this. And so therefore, we need to start censoring these people and these people are dangerous, right? The people that they list. And they're not coming forward and telling us, oh, but this is just another arm of our campaign, essentially. This is just another arm
Right.
of our political leanings. And so, our political side said this.
So the first thing I knew that there was something political going on because the chair of the board on the 990s is a guy named Simon Clark. He's an American, and he was formerly at the Center for American Progress, which you might remember, basically helped to run Hillary Clinton's campaign. They're they're not, I don't call them like a left of center think tank. I call them a Democratic Party think tank. They're
Hmm.
much the same as like Heritage Foundation is basically a Republican Party, think tank. They're not a conservative. They're basically like a think tank for the Republican Party. Whereas something like Cato, I think, is much more ideological. They're much more libertarian. They're less connected directly with a political party. I try to make some of these distinctions at time. So my guess is that Simon Clark has been, ushering them around DC because they're all over the place in DC for a nonprofit that has, like something like Public Citizen, for instance, has been around for like 30, 40 years, and they don't get this kind of swing, because, they're more of a traditional do-gooder, left of center nonprofit. They're not a naked political campaign the way Center
Hmm.
for Countering Digital Hate is.
So how are they planning to kill Musk's Twitter? How do you get rid of Twitter?
So if you look at the document, what it says is the first bullet point sort of is kill Musk Twitter. Right below that, it says advertising focus. And so what this tells me is that they're recapitulating the same strategy they use in England, right? Which is to make accusations of hate, make accusations of anti-Semitism, make accusations of misinformation, right? To then scare away advertisers. And that's been their plan and their strategies, from the beginning. I wrote a piece last sort of, I think earlier this year for the New York Post, when Elon Musk took out a lawsuit against them. I saw very clearly what was going on because you could see the attacks coming from the Center for Countering Digital Hate, right? And Media Matters for America. Now, Media Matters for America is treated in the same way as if they're an objective nonprofit. But we know who they are because the New York Times
Hmm.
reported who they are. They were created by David Brock. They were there was a big New York Times piece back in 2016 called Hillary Clinton's Outrage Machine about all the sort of nonprofits that David Brock had created. And yet to this day, the media treats them, as if they're an objective New York Times is right now, as we're speaking, working on a story that's going to hit a bunch of conservatives based upon Media Matters information. This is in the emails from the New York Times. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but like, why is the New York Times working only with these Democratic Party sort of affiliated nonprofits? Like, why don't they work on both sides? And I think we kind of know what's going on in the media right now.
Right, right. Do you think this is why Elon changed his tune quite a bit when it came to Israel? I'm just curious because this was like such a strange thing to have happened where, we heard about the attack with advertisers going after Twitter. And there was this
Right.
whole push to get rid of the advertisers. Elon was scrambling, his CEO was scrambling, and they were accusing of anti-Semitism. It seemed to be like the thing that they were using as the way that they were going to rip all these advertisers off of Twitter. And he just bought this thing for billions of dollars, right? So he's freaking out.
Right.
And then suddenly we see this pilgrimage to Israel. Suddenly we see this like complete and total shift when it comes to Israel. And a lot of us suspected that it was very much, they seem to be correlated, right? It seemed to be that they were threatening him with the advertising. They were calling him an anti-Semite, and suddenly he does a pilgrimage to Israel and he's all in for Israel. Do you think there was any connection there?
I think there were bigger people involved in that than, Center for Countering Digital Hate. I think there were much bigger much bigger movers than that. I can tell you that, the campaign that CCDH ran sort of on behalf of Labor Together, which is a political campaign, and they were created by Labor Together. You know, one of the biggest funders for Labor Together is a guy named Trevor Chin, who I had no clue who the guy is. He's a British Jewish financier. He was one of the main funders for Labor Together. And so if it involved someone like that, if it involved, like, I don't know, direct conversations with Netanyahu, you know, I have no clue what caused Elon Musk to do that 180. But, you know, hey, you saw it and I saw it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I guess the big question now is what now? Like, now we know about this organization. We know that they are creating all of this. So, you know, they're supposedly helping us clean up the internet from misinformation, and really they're
Right.
just pushing a political agenda. So what is, you know, we, the average person, what do you think the game plan is for us seeing this and knowing that they're trying to take away our free speech? They're trying to meddle with these elections. They're trying to label people conspiracy theorists and misinformation peddlers who are maybe not, maybe some are, maybe some aren't, right? But we should be able to make
Right.
that decision, or at least see, rather than a political operative telling us. I mean, if it were up to the political operatives, we would think, you know, Donald Trump is literally Hitler, apparently. And so we have to be
Right.
worried about that. You know, there's a lot of things that are being said. So what do we do? What do you think we should do?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing that, you know, something to think about is, you know, after our piece came out, there were two counter, like, sort of reactions. Like, is it really, like, are they really what Paul Thacker and Matt Taibbi reported? One was in the Washington Post, right? One of their technology reporters, of course. And the other one was in the Guardian, which is basically like, you know, an arm of, you know, Labor Together, of the conservative arm of Labor, you know, which Keir Starmer runs. You know, and this is because Imran Ahmed has ties with these people. Like, I expected this stuff already. This guy has been a media political operative for like years right now, has contacts throughout all the media. I don't know what to tell people to do, except to, my one advice is always for people is to read wisely, read widely. You know, try to get your information from as many different sources as possible. Don't think that everything you read in the Washington Post is garbage or the New York Times is garbage. Don't think everything that's like alternative media is like, you know, good. There's good and bad everywhere. And I think in this really kind of deteriorated, you know, media environment, you have to get information from many different sources as possible, because there's good stuff everywhere. There are amazing reporters that don't work at mainstream media outlets, and there are terrible reporters that work in the New York Times, that work at the Washington Post. And so just try to get your information as many places as possible. And my hope is that this entire disinformation industry is shut down. I think it needs to be shut down, all of it. I think the grants going to academia, I think these academics need to stop it with this nonsense. The stuff coming out of, you know, the State Department and Homeland Security needs to end. I think all of these companies need to end. I mean, if they want to take these tools and use them for national security purposes to deal with foreign, you know, enemies and stuff, that's fine. What they're doing, though, is they're turning this inward and they're turning it on us, you know, and that's unacceptable.
Right. I agree. It's got to go. It's just got to go. And instead, what we have to do is just educate people to do their own fact checking. Like, where was this disinformation, you know, industry back when we were kids and our uncles were telling us stories? You know, I mean, you know, or the neighbor telling you a weird story.
Exactly. When I started off in journalism in 2000, I moved to New York and worked at 2 different magazines. My first job, a typical first job in journalism, is a fact checker. Like, that's your job. You get to write short pieces and you're a fact checker. I did fact checking. I know how it's done. I know what the process is. We're now basically, we don't check facts. Fact checkers don't check facts. They check narratives. They don't care if your facts are right or not. The whole issue is, like, are you within, like, what is accepted by the left of center sort of politics, you know, within inside the federal government, within the Democratic Party? Once you stray too far from that, you go too far to the left, you go too far to the right, you're fact check wrong.
Right.
You know, it doesn't matter whether you have the facts or not. It doesn't matter what documents you have, you're fact check wrong.
Yeah, I agree. This whole industry needs to die. I mean, luckily we were able to cause enough noise to get rid of Nina Jankowicz, right? And the the czar of disinformation that they were putting into an actual official government position, which is just extremely scary that they were actually going to create that position. But so I think we need to make more noise and get rid of this entire the fact checking. I mean, I like the idea of the community notes, I suppose, on Twitter where anybody can.
Yes.
But then again, I'm like, who are these people exactly? I'm not able to write a community note, so who gets to write these notes? You know, that's. I mean, Wikipedia. I know people don't like Wikipedia at all, and I know Wikipedia has its problems for sure. But I don't know what it's like anymore. But it used to be where anybody could go in there and edit something and change something. I don't know if they allow that anymore, or if they also have their own select people that they've decided are the ones who are going to say, you know, and fact check.
Wikipedia is a complete cesspool right now. One of the former founders, I believe his name's Larry Sanger, pointed out you can't trust it anymore. If you go to my Wikipedia page, right, it will tell you that I'm an anti-vaxxer. Why is it telling you that I'm an anti-vaxxer? Because I wrote an investigation of Pfizer's clinical trial pointing out that there were problems, right? When I was assigned that story, I told my wife, who was finishing up, she'd left the hospital where she works at to finish up her PhD. And I told her, like, honey, I'm going to a pit for like 2 weeks. Like, I could see I've got like all these documents I got to go through. I've got secret recordings. I got to make sure that this person isn't lying to us. It's going to, like, I'm going to be working around the clock for 2 weeks about this vaccine. And she's like, which one is it? And I said, it's the Pfizer vax. And she's like, well, that's the one we got. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that was the one that we had gotten. Like, that's what we had in Spain because that's what Spain got. So I disclosed at the bottom of my investigation, I was required to by the BMJ to disclose that I was double vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine. I still got called anti-vax.
Right. That's how it works. That's how it works.
It's on my Wikipedia page.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. But the concept of it was good in the beginning. I think the concept of Wikipedia and the concept of community notes, they both have a very similar concept. But of course, even this shows that even those concepts can be corrupted. So it's that just so maybe there just shouldn't be any of. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I like the community notes, especially when I see a video and you know it'll show something really outrageous, and then the community notes say, "Oh, that's not actually from that event. That's actually from a." Like I saw one. It was like a Kamala Harris rally. Look at all of these people at this Kamala Harris event, and then the community note said, "That's a country music concert." You know, that wasn't Kamala Harris event at all. You know, so I appreciate it, but I also have to be worried because I don't know who these community noters are, who these, you know, the people editing Wikipedia.
Just last month when I was on vacation, I got I got one of these like fact checks on something I'd uploaded on Facebook. There was a video going around from Kamala Harris talking about, it was something along the lines about, you know, like, well, we're going to regulate that. It had something to do something along those lines. I can't remember exactly what it was, but so I took that video and I put it on Facebook and I said, you know, because in my head, I'm like, how do you not know about the First Amendment? Like, you went to college, you went to law school, you then became a prosecutor, you then became attorney general, you're then vice president. Like, how do you not know the Constitution? So it irritated me so much. And I said, you know, I said something like the Democratic nominee who wants to be president does not understand the Constitution, something like that. I got a note on Facebook that I had misshared a video because other people had said other things about the video. Now, the fact check came actually when I clicked on it, it was a fact check in Italy. So I had to like go through and like translate it from Italian into English so I could understand what it actually said. And the thing was crazy because it was like, I didn't say anything about what these other people said about the video. Like, I didn't say that it came out 4 years ago. I didn't say any of these things. I just said, I don't like what she's shared, you know, but I got checked on that for misinformation, you know, by Italians. Why are Italians messing with the American, like, election? Like, what is going on?
Yeah. Good point. Really good point. I mean, it just really boils down to we all have to do our own fact checking. We all have to do our own research and our own, you know, that needs to be taught to people and instilled in our culture of don't just trust anything and everything. Do your own research and fact check. But of course, one of the problems with that, right? The government doesn't want us to do our own research. Certainly like during the COVID pandemic, we saw that. Just trust them. Trust the science, right? Trust them, what they have to say. Don't do your own research.
you can see it also like when, that sort of crazy thing that happened in Springfield, Ohio, where like we were being told that Haitians were maybe eating pets or something like that.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what was going on, but like this whole thing sounds crazy, right? I mean, but like I still, at the same time, I saw these videos of people going for this, city council and they're upset, and so I'm like, something weird's going on in this city, I
Mhm.
didn't know. But like, what did the reporters do? When you see the reports, they called up the police chief and said, "Hey, did anything bad happen in your city?" Nope. Fact check wrong. It's like we're in this
Right.
point right now where basically what journalists do is when there's a controversy, they actually go to the people in charge and ask them if there's any problem with them. It would be like, like, is there any problem with GlaxoSmithKline's like latest drug coming out? Well, we talked to the CEO and he said no. Fact check wrong. Like this independent
Right.
evaluation, they obviously don't know what they're doing. That's what we've turned like journalism into right now.
Yeah, just ask the authorities. And the authorities said
Yes,
everything's okay.
right.
It's
It's
completely
crazy. It's
against
the
what
opposite
journalism
of
is supposed to
journalism.
be. Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Journalism is supposed to
exactly.
actually look at authority and find out if they're lying to us and hold them accountable. But instead, we're just, oh, they said. And so therefore,
Right.
it is what it
What's
is.
what's 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 crazy is that it's 2024 and you actually need to explain that to people because my guess is that there's some people in their 20s who don't even know that anymore. They don't even understand that concept anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of that. Just trust the authorities. That's all you need to do. It reminds me very much of Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, who said, you should just get your information from the government. Only trust the government. Don't listen to all of
Right?
these people online.
I know.
Crazy.
Well, here's something I know. Here's what I know is going to happen is it'll be interesting to watch. If Trump wins the presidency, watch how suddenly you're going to see a total pivot with all the censorship industrial complex, big disinformation is suddenly going to be questioning the government all the time. They never did before, but I'm
Right.
interesting to see like how we get a pivot all of a sudden. There's one interesting fact which I don't know you're aware of, but there was a report in the Harvard Misinformation Review, which is like their sort of Bible of like all these disinformation I call them the censorship clergy. Like they're like the new priests, and their job is to tell us what we can and cannot do. Before it's like who we can and cannot have sex with, and when we can and cannot have sex. Now it's like what you can and cannot say, and what you can and cannot think, right?
Hmm.
And at the bottom of this, it was a survey of the academics in this area, and there was an appendix at the bottom. What was interesting about that is it talked about the political leanings of the people in this industry. There were no conservatives, none. There were a handful of center right, and then some more center left, but like 85% of them were either center left to far left, and zero conservatives. And I'm sorry, like I'm no one's idea of a conservative, but like everyone has a right to have an opinion. And the way it
Right.
works in journalism is you interview everyone to get their opinion because everyone has their own experiences that explains why they think the way they do. It's just like being a journalist or just being a basic like decent human being. I mean, I
Hmm.
think that's how it works.
Paul Thacker, thank you so much for joining us and being here and giving us all of this information. People can find you at Disinformation Chronicle. That's your Substack. We do have the link down below. We also have the link down below to the actual piece that you guys wrote, that you and Matt Taibbi put out there. Let's see, it's this one right here. Racket News, election exclusive. British advisors to Kamala Harris hope to kill Musk's Twitter. So people can read that. That link is down below. Paul, once again, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Kim, thanks for having me on.
Thank you. All right, guys, did you know that most creamers aren't even made with real cream or dairy products? Instead, they're packed with oils and sugars and thickeners and chemicals. Definitely, you don't want any of that in your coffee. Well, 1775's coffee creamer is the solution. 10 grams of whey protein, no sugar, no fat, and under 50 calories per serving. No junk, just fuel. So whether you're fasting or building muscle or just need an extra boost, this creamer has your back. And if you're a real coffee lover, 1775's coffee's new pods, they bring the same high quality single origin beans now in a convenient format. Plus, their brain boosting mushroom blend will keep you sharp all day. So head to 1775coffee.com, grab your protein creamer, check out the new lineup. start your mornings with something real. And all you've got to do is use code Kim in order to get 15% off. So again, 1775 coffee. Use code Kim. You're going to get 15% off. All right, guys, we are now going to shut down the stream on Rumble. We are going, on YouTube. We are going Rumble exclusive now. So this is where things are going to get more interactive. We're going to have a bit more fun on the Rumble side of things. This is where we can actually speak freely, say what we want without worry about being censored. So join us. That link is down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're on Rumble, just stick around. We're going to keep on going. The show continues. But otherwise, if you're not going to join us over there, which you should, but if you're not going to, you can catch the show every Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you guys so much for watching. Those of you on YouTube, bye. Rumble guys, here we go. All right, we're back.